My blood froze. I had just opened a voice message on my phone, one that my daughter must have sent me by accident. At first, I thought it was just another casual recording, maybe her laughing with the kids or reminding me about groceries. But the words I heard nearly stopped my heart. "I can't stand this useless old hag anymore," my daughter's voice hissed. "Soon she'll be taking her final nap, and we'll be spending all her money in Paris." Her voice was followed by a light chuckle in the background. A man's laugh. Her husband. I dropped the phone on the floor. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely breathe. My own daughter, the girl I raised, fed, and sacrificed everything for, was planning my death. Not only planning it, but celebrating it. I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to calm my racing heart. The world around me felt like it was spinning. Every second that passed replayed her words in my head. Final nap, money in Paris, useless old hag. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But instead I picked up the phone, wiped the screen with my shaking hand, and made one single phone call. That one call would put into action a plan I had been quietly preparing for months, a plan I never thought I would have to use, not against my own flesh and blood. That was the moment my story truly began. But let me take you back a little so you can understand how things got this far. Before I do, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Margaret Wilson. I'm 72 years old and I live in Charleston, South Carolina. I've been a widow for nearly 10 years now, and I spend most of my days gardening, knitting, and occasionally watching those detective shows that make me laugh because the criminals always leave silly clues behind. Before I continue, I want to pause and say this. If you're listening to my story right now, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and click that notification button because I promise you don't want to miss what's coming next. And tell me in the comments, which part of the country are you watching from? I always love hearing where people are tuning in from. Alright, back to my story. It all started a year before that chilling voice message. My daughter Emily had always been, well, a little difficult. She wasn't like her brother John, who was hardworking, honest, and always calling to check on me. Emily was different. From the time she was a teenager, she wanted fancy clothes, the best shoes, and the type of lifestyle I couldn't afford to give her. I worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table after her father died. But no matter what I gave Emily, it was never enough. When she married Richard, I hoped things would change. I thought marriage would settle her down, teach her about sacrifice, responsibility, and love. But Richard wasn't the man I thought he was. He was charming on the outside, always smiling and making small jokes, but behind that charm was a greedy, manipulative man. The kind who only cared about money, appearances, and control. Still, I tried to get along with him, for Emily's sake. I even helped them buy their first home by giving them a huge portion of my savings. I told myself it was an investment in my daughter's happiness. But the more time passed, the more I noticed how Emily had started changing too. She no longer visited me on weekends unless she needed something. She no longer called just to ask how I was doing. When she did call, it was about money. Always money. First I gave it. Because that's what mothers do, right? We sacrifice for our children. But slowly I began to see the pattern. Every dollar I gave her ended up in some new luxury bag, some vacation with Richard, or some dinner at a fancy restaurant. One afternoon, when I said no to her request, she snapped at me. "What good is your money if you're just sitting in that old house doing nothing with it? You should be happy to help your only daughter." Her words stung. She didn't see me as her mother anymore. She saw me as a wallet. That night, I sat in my rocking chair, staring at the photographs of my late husband on the wall. He had worked so hard to build a life for us, and I couldn't help but wonder what he would think if he saw what Emily had become. But nothing could have prepared me for the voice message that accidentally landed in my inbox. It happened on a Saturday morning. I had just finished watering my roses when my phone buzzed. Emily's name appeared on the screen, and I smiled, thinking maybe she was finally calling just to say hello. But when I opened it, it wasn't a call. It was a voice recording. I pressed play, and there it was. The betrayal, the cruelty, the plan to kill me for money. Now, before I tell you about the call I made, the one that set everything in motion, I need you to understand one important thing about me. I may be old, but I am not weak. Life has taught me lessons, and one of those lessons is this. When people show you who they are, believe them. I believed Emily. I believed every word of that recording. And that's when I decided I would not go down without a fight. But just as I was gathering my strength to make my move, something else happened that very same day. Something that made my blood run cold all over again. Because just a few hours later, I heard someone at my back door. The knock wasn't polite. It was sharp, hurried, 3 taps, then silence. My heart jumped straight into my throat. For a second, I thought it was just a delivery, but no delivery man uses the back door. I froze in my chair, clutching the phone in my trembling hands. My eyes darted to the curtains. Whoever it was hadn't rung the doorbell. They had come quietly, as though they didn't want to be noticed. I took a deep breath, steadied my shaking fingers, and crept toward the kitchen. My back door had a small glass panel, just enough to see shadows outside. I peeked through the curtain. A man was standing there. His head was turned away, but I recognized the shape of him. Broad shoulders. Tall frame. It was Richard. My son-in-law. My blood ran cold. I didn't open the door. Instead, I stood frozen, my hand hovering just above the doorknob. He knocked again, softer this time, then tried the handle. It rattled. Thank God I had locked it. Margaret. His voice was too calm, too friendly. It's me. Richard. Just thought I'd stop by. I didn't answer. I pressed my back against the wall, praying he wouldn't hear the thundering of my heart. Why was he here? Why now? He never visited me alone. He never came without Emily. Was this part of the plan? The voice message echoed in my head. Final nap. Richard lingered at the door for a moment longer. Then I heard his footsteps retreating. Slowly. Quietly. I stayed in place for a full 5 minutes before daring to peek outside again. He was gone. But the fear stayed. I sank into the kitchen chair and buried my face in my hands. My daughter's voice message wasn't just words anymore. It was action. Richard showing up at my back door unannounced confirmed everything. They weren't waiting. They were moving. I picked up my phone and dialed the number again. The same one I had called earlier after hearing the message. A voice answered. Calm, steady, familiar. It's time, I whispered. The person on the other end didn't ask questions. They only said, I'll be there by nightfall. For the first time that day, I felt a sliver of safety. A sliver of control. But that safety was short-lived because later that evening, as the sun began to sink over Charleston, I saw something that chilled me all over again. From my window, I spotted Richard's car parked just down the street. He wasn't gone after all. He was watching my house. And that's when I realized. They weren't planning to wait for Paris. They were planning to make their move sooner than I ever imagined. When I first saw Richard's car parked down the street, I told myself maybe it was just coincidence. Maybe he had some errand nearby. But deep inside, I knew better. Richard didn't run errands in my part of town. He was there for me. The sinking sun painted the street in orange and gold. But the sight of his car turned all that beauty into something sinister. I pulled the curtain back just an inch, my eyes fixed on that shadowy figure behind the windshield. He wasn't moving, wasn't even pretending to be doing anything else. He was watching. My stomach churned. For 72 years I had lived through storms, sickness, and even burying the man I loved, but nothing made me feel as weak as the thought of my own daughter and her husband plotting my death. I stepped away from the window, forcing myself to breathe. Calm down, Margaret, I whispered. You're not helpless. You're not alone. The phone call I had made earlier that day replayed in my head. The voice on the other end had promised to come by nightfall. That gave me hope. Until then I had to stay quiet. Stay sharp. I turned off the lights in the living room, moving through the house in near darkness, like some old spy. Every creak of the wooden floorboards made me flinch. My house, once my sanctuary, now felt like a trap. I tried to distract myself by making tea, but my hands were trembling too much to pour the water. I set the kettle back down and sank into my chair. My late husband's photograph sat on the mantel, his kind eyes staring at me. I whispered to him, George, if only you were here. You'd know what to do. Then out of nowhere my phone buzzed. I nearly dropped it. It was a text message from Emily. Mom. Just checking on you. Hope you're okay. Love you. I stared at the screen, my lips curling into a bitter smile. Love you. The same lips that had called me a useless old hag just hours ago were now pretending to care. The cruelty of it made my hands shake with anger. I didn't reply. Instead, I powered the phone off completely. I couldn't trust her. Not anymore. Minutes stretched into hours. The clock ticked toward 9 o'clock, and the street outside grew darker. Richard's car was still there. Waiting. Watching. Then finally, I heard it. The sound of another car pulling up in front of my house. My heart leapt, but I stayed still until I saw the familiar headlights flash twice, the signal we had agreed upon long ago. Relief washed over me. I hurried to the door and opened it. Standing there was Detective Harris. Harris wasn't just any officer. He had been my husband's best friend back in the day, and after George passed, he had kept in touch with me. Over the years, I had told him about the way Emily and Richard were treating me. Not everything, just enough for him to worry. He had once warned me, "Margaret, if anything ever feels wrong, you call me. Don't hesitate." And so, when I heard Emily's chilling message that morning, he was the only one I could think of. "Evening, Margaret," Harris said, his deep voice steady. "You look pale." "They're out there," I whispered, pointing toward the street. "Richard's been sitting in his car for hours." Harris glanced down the road, his jaw tightening. "I see him." The detective stepped inside, closing the door firmly behind him. "Don't worry. We're going to handle this. But I need you to stay calm, okay? Tell me everything." I sat him down in the living room and played the voice message for him. His expression didn't change as he listened, but I could see the fire in his eyes. When it ended, he leaned back slowly. "That's enough to open an investigation. But Margaret, if they really are planning something soon, we can't just wait. We need evidence, hard proof. How do we get that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He tapped his chin thoughtfully. "We let them think their plan is working. We draw them out." The words made my stomach twist. Draw them out. That meant letting Emily and Richard get close. Too close. "I don't know if I can do that," I admitted, my hands trembling again. "You won't be alone," Harris assured me. "I'll make sure of it. But Margaret, you need to understand. If you want justice, if you want to stop them, you'll have to be brave." I looked into his eyes. There was no pity there, only determination. And for the first time since that dreadful morning, I felt a spark of courage inside me. "All right," I said. "I'll do it." Just as I spoke those words, a loud bang echoed through the house. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. Harris was on his feet in an instant, his hand on his sidearm. We both turned toward the sound. It had come from the back door. Slowly, carefully, Harris moved toward the kitchen. I followed behind, my knees weak but my will stronger than ever. When we reached the door, we saw it. A fresh crack in the wooden frame, as if someone had tried to force it open. "Stay back," Harris ordered. He flicked off the kitchen light, then crouched near the window, peering outside. I held my breath. There was movement in the yard. A shadow slipped quickly along the side of the house, heading toward the front. "Richard." Harris looked back at me, his voice low and urgent. "They're not just watching anymore. They're moving in." And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a game of patience anymore. The battle had already begun. The crack in the wooden frame still seemed to echo in my ears. My body shook, but Harris remained steady, crouched low with his hand hovering over his holster. "Stay behind me, Margaret," he whispered. His voice was calm, but the steel in it made me obey without hesitation. We moved silently into the hallway, the house dim except for the faint glow of the streetlights seeping through the curtains. My heart thumped so loudly I feared Richard would hear it from outside. Another sound came, a faint scrape like shoes sliding over gravel. Harris held up his hand, signaling me to stay put. Then he stepped closer to the front window and peered out. I pressed my back to the wall, clutching my robe tightly around me. Every second stretched like an eternity. Finally Harris turned to me, his expression grim. "It's him. He's circling the house." A cold shiver ran down my spine. "He's hunting me," I thought. "My own son-in-law." Harris leaned close, whispering, "We need to make him think he's not alone. If he believes you're inside with company, he might back off. But if he thinks you're defenseless..." The unfinished sentence hung in the air like smoke. Before I could respond, a loud clunk rattled from the back again, this time followed by the squeak of metal against metal. Harris swore under his breath. He's got tools. He's trying to break in. I nearly collapsed from fear, but Harris steadied me with one firm hand on my shoulder. Listen, Margaret. You've got to trust me. Stay here. Do not move. No matter what happens, don't make a sound. My knees wobbled, but I nodded. Harris slipped toward the back door, moving quietly as a shadow. The next thing I heard was his voice, loud, commanding, booming through the kitchen window. Richard. Charleston Police. Step away from the property now. The words rang through the night like thunder. I ran to the hall and peeked from the corner. Through the glass panel in the back door, I saw Richard freeze, his hand still clutching something shiny, maybe a crowbar. His face twisted in shock, then anger. You've got this all wrong, Richard shouted back, his voice dripping with fake innocence. I was just checking in on my mother-in-law. Checking in with a crowbar? Harris shot back. Step away from the door before I put you in cuffs. Richard's jaw clenched. He hesitated, then slowly raised his hands. But even from where I stood, I could see the fury burning in his eyes. That was when my phone, silent all this time, suddenly buzzed to life. The vibration rattled against the wooden table, loud in the tense silence. I glanced at the screen. It was Emily. And just like that, Richard's head snapped toward the sound. He smirked. Emily's worried about her dear old mom, he sneered. Don't worry, Margaret. She'll be here soon enough. The words chilled me deeper than the autumn night air. Before Harris could reply, Richard dropped his hands, turned on his heel, and vanished into the shadows of my yard. Harris cursed and rushed to the door, but Richard was gone, his car engine roaring seconds later as he sped off into the night. The silence that followed felt heavier than the danger itself. I leaned against the wall, gasping for air. My heart was still hammering when Harris came back inside, locking the door firmly behind him. He's gone for now, Harris said, his voice tight with frustration. But this confirms it, Margaret. He wasn't here to check in. He was here to start something. I sank into my chair, my hands trembling. He won't stop, will he? Harris met my eyes, and for the first time he didn't try to reassure me. He just said, no. He won't stop until we stop him. At that very moment my phone buzzed again, this time not a call. A message. From Emily. It read, "Don't fight it, Mom. It'll be easier that way." The room spun. My daughter wasn't just involved. She was warning me, threatening me, telling me my fate had already been decided. And that was when I knew. The battle wasn't coming. It was already here. I stared at the glowing screen in my trembling hand. Don't fight it, Mom. It'll be easier that way. My own daughter had written those words. Not a stranger, not some thief in the night, but Emily. The little girl I once rocked to sleep, the child I had spoon-fed when she was sick, the teenager I had defended when others called her spoiled. Now she was telling me to surrender my life, as though it were some kind of inconvenience. My stomach turned. I felt like I was going to be sick. Margaret. Harris's voice pulled me back. He had been standing over me, his eyes sharp on the phone in my hand. He took it gently and read the message, his jaw tightening. That's direct evidence. She's threatening you openly now. I shook my head slowly, tears blurring my vision. How could she? Harris, she's my only daughter. His voice softened. I know, but you can't afford to think of her as your daughter anymore. Not if you want to survive this. You need to see her for what she's become. The words cut deep, but I knew they were true. I wiped my tears and forced myself to straighten up. What do we do now? Harris lowered his voice, as if Emily herself could somehow hear us. We turn the tables. They think you're alone, weak, ready to fall. We're going to make them believe they're winning. Until we have them exactly where we want them. I shivered. That sounds dangerous. It is, he said simply. But it's the only way. If we wait, they'll strike. If we strike first, we can end this on our terms. I sat back in my chair, clutching my robe. My heart was still racing, but a spark of strength flickered inside me. I had survived 72 years of life. I wasn't going to let my story end like this. Tell me what to do, I said. Harris nodded. First, we keep every message, every call. Don't delete anything. That recording, that text, that's gold in court. Second, we need them to talk more. The more they reveal, the tighter the noose. And third, I asked. He leaned closer. We set a trap. Something that forces them to make their move while I'm ready and waiting. The word trap echoed in my ears. It sounded like something out of the detective shows I watched at night. Except this time it wasn't a show. This was my life. For the rest of the evening, Harris stayed with me, pacing, writing notes, and making a few quiet calls. I sat on the couch, hugging a blanket around me, my mind spinning. I kept seeing Emily's face, kept hearing her laugh from when she was a little girl. How had she turned into this? Greed? Richard's influence? Or had she always been this way and I was just too blind to see? At one point, Harris caught me staring at her old photos on the mantel. Don't torture yourself, Margaret, he said softly. Sometimes blood ties blind us. But you're seeing clearly now, and that's your strength. I nodded, though the ache in my chest didn't fade. As midnight approached, Harris decided to leave but promised he'd be back at dawn. Lock every door. Keep your phone close. If they try anything, call me first before you call anyone else. I walked him to the door, fear prickling the back of my neck as I watched him step into the night. Richard's car was gone, but the quiet street felt dangerous, like wolves could be lurking just out of sight. When Harris drove away, I locked the door and leaned against it, exhausted. I wanted nothing more than to crawl into bed and sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were still on me. I ended up dozing in my armchair, the lamp casting a warm glow over the room. At some point, I dreamed of Emily as a child again, her small hands reaching out for mine. Don't let me go, Mommy, she whispered. But when I tried to hold on, her hand slipped away, and suddenly she was gone, replaced by Richard's cold grin. I woke with a start. The house was silent, but my phone buzzed on the table. Another message. My throat tightened as I picked it up. This time it wasn't from Emily. It was from an unknown number. Tick-tock, Grandma. Time's running out. My blood froze all over again. The message had no name, no clue of who sent it. But I didn't need a clue. I knew. It was Richard. I clutched the phone tightly, every nerve in my body screaming. Was he outside again? Was he watching me while I slept? I hurried to the window and peeked through the curtains. The street was empty, but that didn't ease my mind. He could be anywhere, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment. I collapsed into my chair, whispering prayers under my breath. God, give me strength. Don't let me fall before I can fight back. Hours dragged by. At dawn, just as Harris promised, his car pulled up in front of my house. Relief washed over me when he walked through the door, but I wasted no time showing him the new message. He frowned, his eyes narrowing. They're escalating. Good. That means they're getting desperate. We can use this. I blinked at him. Good? Harris, they're threatening me. He placed a firm hand on my shoulder. Margaret, listen. Every threat they make is another nail in their coffin. They're digging their own grave. You just have to let them. I swallowed hard, nodding slowly. For the next few hours, Harris and I planned. He showed me how to set my phone to record automatically when calls came in. He even installed a tiny camera above the front door, tucked neatly into the wreath I had hanging there. By the time this is done, he said, we'll have enough evidence to put them both away for a very long time. I wanted to believe him. Truly I did. But then late that afternoon, something happened that shook me to my core and made me realize just how far Emily and Richard were willing to go. I had just sat down with Harris for coffee when my landline rang. The sound startled me. It hardly ever rang anymore, since most people used my cell. I picked it up cautiously. Hello. A familiar voice answered. Sweet. Gentle. Deceptive. Mom. It was Emily. My throat went dry. Harris motioned for me to keep her talking, so I did. Emily, why are you calling from the house phone? She chuckled lightly. Always with the questions. I just wanted to check on you. You know, make sure you're doing okay. I could hear the falseness dripping from every word. My hands shook as I held the receiver. I'm fine, I said slowly. There was a pause on the other end. Then her tone changed, sharp, cold. and laced with venom. Not for long. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I lowered the phone, my face pale. Harris stared at me, his expression dark. "She's making her move," he said. And before I could even ask what he meant, we both heard it. Tires screeching outside, followed by the slam of car doors. I rushed to the window. Emily and Richard were walking up my driveway. The sound of their footsteps on the gravel was like thunder in my ears. My daughter and her husband were no longer shadows, no longer distant threats. They were right here, coming straight to my door. I clutched the edge of the curtain, peeking through just enough to see them. Emily walked ahead, her chin high, her hair perfectly styled as if she were going to brunch instead of plotting her mother's death. Richard followed close behind, his hands shoved into his pockets, that smug grin plastered across his face. "They're here," I whispered, my throat dry. Harris moved swiftly, lowering the blinds and motioning me toward the hallway. "Stay out of sight. Let me handle this." "But, no buts, Margaret. If they see you, they'll play innocent. We need them to show their real intentions. Do you understand?" I swallowed hard and nodded. My heart screamed to confront Emily, to demand answers, but I forced myself to obey. I slipped into the hallway, just far enough back that I could still hear. The doorbell rang. Once, twice, then a loud bang rattled the wood. "Mom!" Emily's voice sang, too sweet, too rehearsed. "It's me. Open up." Harris straightened his jacket and opened the door halfway, blocking their path. "Evening," he said flatly. Emily blinked, startled. "Detective Harris? What are you doing here?" Richard's grin faltered for a moment before he quickly masked it. "Yeah, what's this about?" "We just came to check on Mom." "She's fine," Harris replied. His tone was clipped, professional, giving nothing away. "But she's resting right now, so you'll have to leave." Emily's smile thinned. "Resting? At this hour? That's strange. Mom always welcomes me in." "Not tonight," Harris said firmly. I held my breath, pressing my palm against my chest to calm my pounding heart. There was a pause. Then Richard leaned forward, his voice low and edged with challenge. "You can't keep us from seeing her. She's our family." Harris didn't flinch. "I can and I will. Now, unless you'd like to discuss this down at the station, I suggest you both head home." The silence stretched. I could imagine Emily's eyes narrowing, her brain working quickly to calculate her next move. Finally, she let out a light laugh. "Well, Detective, no need to be so dramatic. We'll come back another time. Right, Richard?" Richard's jaw clenched, but he nodded stiffly. "Yeah. Another time." Their footsteps retreated, slow and heavy. Then the slam of car doors. The roar of the engine. The car sped off into the night. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My legs nearly gave out as I stumbled back into the living room. "They're gone. For now," Harris said, closing the door firmly and double-checking the locks. "But they'll be back. You saw it on their faces. They're not finished." I sank into the couch, tears pricking my eyes. That was my daughter, Harris. My little girl. She looked at this house like it was already hers. He crouched beside me, his voice steady. "And that's exactly why we need to stay one step ahead. You've got courage, Margaret. More than you know. But from here on out, things are only going to get harder." I nodded slowly, clutching the blanket around me. I knew he was right. Tonight had only been a test. Emily and Richard were circling like vultures, and sooner or later, they'd strike again. But what I didn't know, what neither of us could have predicted, was that their next move would come sooner than we expected. Because less than 24 hours later, I received another message. This one didn't come from Emily's phone. It came from Richard's. And it wasn't a threat this time. It was a photo. A photo of me, taken from outside my own bedroom window. The photo burned into my eyes as I stared at it on the phone screen. My hands trembled so violently that I nearly dropped the device. It was me, sitting on the edge of my bed in my nightgown, my head bowed, oblivious to the danger lurking outside. Richard had been there, outside my bedroom, watching me. My chest tightened, and the air seemed to vanish from the room. "Harris," I croaked, shoving the phone toward him. Look at this." He snatched it from my hands, his jaw locking tight. For a long moment he didn't speak, only studied the picture, his nostrils flaring. Finally he let out a slow, heavy breath. They've crossed the line. This isn't just intimidation anymore. It's stalking. They're escalating. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold in the shaking. He was right there, Harris. Outside my window while I slept. I didn't even know. You weren't supposed to, he said grimly. That's the point. They want you scared. They want you weak. Well, it's working, I whispered, shame burning in my chest. I feel like a prisoner in my own house. Harris crouched in front of me, his eyes steady, his voice firm. Listen to me, Margaret. That's what they want. But you're not weak. You're stronger than they realize. And you're not alone. I won't let them get to you. For a moment, I saw the same fierce determination in his eyes that I used to see in George's when he was alive. It gave me just enough strength to breathe again. What do we do now? I asked. Harris stood, pacing. We make their obsession their undoing. They're watching you? Good. Let them. We'll give them something to watch. My brow furrowed. What do you mean? A setup, he explained. We'll let them think you're vulnerable, that you're alone, and then we'll catch them in the act. Cameras, recordings, the works. Once we have enough evidence, they won't just be suspects, they'll be criminals with no escape. The thought made me shudder. But what if they try to hurt me before you can stop them? He came closer, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. Then I'll be here. You have my word. I nodded, though fear still knotted my stomach. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. That night, Harris stayed in the guest room. He insisted. No way am I leaving you here alone after that photo. I was grateful, though sleep still didn't come easily. Every creak of the house made me jolt awake. I kept seeing that photo in my mind, kept imagining Richard's face pressed against the glass as he took it. When morning finally came, I shuffled into the kitchen to find Harris already up, sipping coffee, his notebook open on the table. Morning, he said without looking up. I've been thinking. They'll probably try again soon. Richard's the kind of man who gets bolder when he thinks he's not being stopped. I sank into the chair opposite him. Emily too, I whispered. Saying her name hurt more than I wanted to admit. He nodded. Emily too. Which is why we're going to let them think you're exactly where they want you, helpless. We'll bait the trap, but we'll be ready. How? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Tonight, I want you to act as if you're alone. Don't answer their calls. Don't acknowledge their messages. Just go about your evening like normal. Meanwhile, I'll be here out of sight. I've already arranged for another officer to park down the street. If Richard or Emily try to make a move, we'll catch them. The plan made sense, but dread gnawed at my insides. You're asking me to be the bait. Harris didn't sugarcoat it. Yes, but you'll be protected every second. You won't be alone. I nodded slowly. It terrified me, but what choice did I have? Running wouldn't solve this. If I didn't face it now, they'd keep coming, keep circling until they succeeded. The rest of the day dragged by painfully slow. I busied myself in the garden, though every rustle of the leaves made me glance over my shoulder. Harris stayed close, his watchful eyes scanning the street. As evening fell, I forced myself into my old routine. I cooked a small dinner, watched my favorite detective show, even knitted by the lamplight, pretending nothing was wrong. But my nerves were strung so tight that every tick of the clock felt like a drumbeat leading me closer to doom. Around 9, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Emily. We're closer than you think, Mom. I froze. My fork clattered against the plate. Slowly, I lifted my gaze to the window. There, in the shadows across the street, a figure stood. Tall. Still. Watching. My blood turned to ice. Harris. I whispered, my voice trembling. They're here. He was on his feet in an instant, motioning for me to stay put. He slipped toward the front door, his hand on his holster. But before he could even reach it, the sound of glass shattering ripped through the house. The kitchen window smashed wide open. Someone was inside. The sound of shattering glass cut through the house like a scream. My heart leapt into my throat, and I stumbled back, clutching the arm of the couch for balance. They're in the house. I whispered to myself, every muscle in my body trembling. Harris reacted instantly. He pulled his weapon and motioned for me to stay low. His eyes were sharp, calculating. "Don't move, Margaret. Stay behind me." From the kitchen came the crunch of footsteps over broken glass. The intruder was moving slow, deliberate, as if savoring each step. The sound of my own heartbeat roared in my ears, drowning out almost everything else. Then a voice, low, mocking. "Mom, are you awake? Emily." I clamped my hand over my mouth to keep from crying out. Hearing my daughter's voice echo through the house, twisted with cruelty, was worse than the sound of the breaking glass. Harris raised his hand, signaling silence. He crept toward the hallway, each step controlled, his gun steady. Emily's voice came again, closer this time. "We know you're here, Mom. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Just cooperate. It'll all be over soon." Tears stung my eyes, blurring my vision. Over soon. She meant my life. The floor creaked. Shadows shifted against the wall. She was almost in the living room. But before she could take another step, Harris stepped out of the shadows, his voice booming like thunder. "Police! Drop whatever you're carrying and step away." Emily froze. I could just see her outline in the dim light, her hands rising slowly, though I couldn't see if she held anything. Her voice changed in an instant, dripping with false innocence. "Detective Harris? Oh, thank goodness. I came because I was worried about Mom. Someone broke in." "Cut the act," Harris snapped. "You're already caught. Where's Richard?" At the sound of his name, my blood chilled even more. Richard. He wasn't with her. Which meant another crash came from the back of the house. Richard. He was inside too. I pressed myself deeper into the couch, my whole body trembling. Harris's attention flicked between Emily and the sound behind him. "Margaret," he said quickly without turning his head. "Get ready to run. If I give the word, you get out that front door and don't look back. Do you hear me?" I nodded, though my legs felt like stone. Emily's laugh echoed through the house, low, cold, and terrifying. "You can't protect her forever, Detective. One way or another, she's ours." Then, from the kitchen doorway, Richard's shadow appeared. His hand glinted. A knife. The knife caught the faint glow of the lamp, flashing like a warning. My breath hitched, and my fingers dug into the couch fabric as if holding on to it could keep me alive. Richard's grin was wide, cruel, his eyes fixed on me. "Evening, Margaret," he said, his voice smooth, almost playful. "You didn't think you'd get rid of us that easy, did you?" "Drop the knife," Harris commanded, his stance solid, his gun aimed steadily at Richard's chest. "Now." Emily lifted her hands higher, but her tone stayed sharp. "Richard, don't. Just put it down." But I knew that voice, too calm, too rehearsed. She wasn't stopping him. She was covering for him. Richard smirked. "Come on, Detective. You wouldn't shoot a family dispute, would you? Poor Mom just misunderstood our intentions. We only came to talk." "Talk?" Harris's voice was a steel edge. "Breaking into her home with a knife in your hand is your idea of a talk?" Richard chuckled, the sound making my stomach churn. "Well, maybe I wanted to make sure she listened." He turned his gaze back to me, his eyes dark and gleaming. "Did you hear that, Margaret? Are you listening now?" My lips trembled. I tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't come. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body refused to move. Harris took a step forward. "Last warning. Put the knife down and step back, or I'll put you down myself." For a moment, time held still. Richard's grip tightened on the knife, his knuckles white. Emily's eyes darted between Harris and me, her jaw tense. Then in one swift move, Richard lunged, not at Harris, but toward me. "No," I screamed, throwing myself sideways off the couch. The knife sliced through the air where I'd been sitting, missing me by inches. A deafening bang exploded through the room. Harris had fired. Richard stumbled back, the knife clattering from his hand as his shoulder jerked violently. He howled in pain, clutching his arm, blood seeping through his shirt. "Stay down," Harris barked, moving to kick the knife out of reach. But Emily sprang forward like a wildcat, shoving Harris with surprising force. "Don't you touch him," she shrieked. The shove barely moved Harris, but it was enough for Richard to scramble toward the kitchen, cradling his injured arm. Harris spun back to Emily, grabbing her wrist. "You're under arrest." Emily twisted and kicked, her voice shrill with rage. "You don't understand. She doesn't deserve that money. It's ours. It was always meant to be ours." Her words cut through me like glass. Always meant to be theirs. I wasn't her mother anymore. I was just a bank account standing in her way. While Harris struggled to restrain Emily, Richard stumbled into the kitchen, leaving a trail of blood. I forced myself up, legs shaky, and darted toward the hallway phone. My trembling fingers barely managed to dial 911. "This is Margaret," I gasped into the receiver. "My daughter and her husband, please send help now. They're trying to kill me." The operator's calm voice guided me, but my ears were full of chaos. The sound of Emily's screams, Harris's sharp commands, and Richard's crashing footsteps as he fumbled with the back door. Then came another shatter. The back door glass bursting as Richard forced his way out into the night. Harris finally managed to cuff Emily, her wrists bound tight behind her. She fought like a cornered animal, spitting venom. "You'll regret this, Mom. You'll regret ever crossing me." Her words echoed in my head, sharp and venomous, as flashing red and blue lights filled the street outside. The cavalry had arrived, 2 squad cars screeching to a halt, officers rushing toward the house. Emily was dragged out, kicking and screaming, her voice cutting through the night air. "He'll come back. You can't stop us both. We'll get what's ours, Mom, you hear me?" Richard was gone. Harris, his chest heaving, placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "They've got her. But he's still out there. And until we catch him, you're not safe." I sank back onto the couch, the room spinning around me. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, was in handcuffs, her husband bleeding but still free, and my life hanging by a thread. The officers swarmed the house, one kneeling beside me. "Ma'am, we'll take you somewhere safe tonight. A hotel, maybe the station. You can't stay here." I nodded numbly, though my heart ached. This was my home, George's and mine. Every photo on the wall, every piece of furniture told our story. But tonight it felt tainted, poisoned by betrayal. Harris crouched in front of me again, his voice gentler now. "Margaret, listen to me. You did good tonight. You're alive because you fought to be. But this isn't over. Richard's desperate, and desperate men are dangerous." I wiped at my tears, my body trembling. "She's my daughter," I whispered. "How did it come to this? How could she look me in the eye and wish me dead?" Harris didn't answer right away. His eyes softened, but his tone was steady. "Sometimes, Margaret, greed rots people from the inside out. They stop seeing family. They only see opportunity. That's why we're going to stop them, before they take everything from you." The lesson stung, but it was true. And as the officers guided me out of my house, past the shattered window and broken glass, I knew one thing with painful clarity. Blood didn't always mean loyalty. And this war for my life had only just begun. The ride to the station was quiet, the flashing blue and red lights bouncing across the windows like ghosts. I sat in the back seat of the patrol car, my hands clenched tight in my lap. My house, the only home I had known for decades, faded into the darkness behind me, broken glass glittering on the porch like tears. Emily's screams still echoed in my head. "You'll regret this, Mom. You'll regret ever crossing me. My daughter. My flesh and blood." Those words weren't the tantrum of a child. They were the threat of a woman who wanted me gone. At the station, Harris met me at the entrance. He'd stayed behind to give his report, but now he walked me in, his expression grim but steady. "We'll set you up in a safe room tonight," he said. "No windows, secure lock, cameras in the hallway. You'll be protected." I nodded, though my heart was heavy. "And Emily? She's in custody. But she'll make bail," Harris admitted. "Richard's the one we need to worry about now. He won't stop until he thinks he's won." Those words made me shiver. Richard was out there, injured but dangerous, and worse, angry. A cornered man with greed in his heart was more terrifying than a knife in the dark. The safe room they gave me was small, with a single bed, a table, and a lamp. Sterile walls, no pictures, no warmth. I lowered myself onto the mattress, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on me. Harris lingered at the door. "Try to rest. Tomorrow we'll talk about next steps. We'll get through this, Margaret." I gave him a weary smile. Thank you, Harris. I don't know what I'd do without you. When the door closed, silence filled the room. I lay there in the dim light, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Every creak, every distant voice in the station made me jump. Sleep was a stranger. Instead, I found myself drifting back in time. Emily as a little girl, running through the yard with pigtails bouncing, calling out, "Look at me, Mommy." I remember tucking her into bed, reading her fairy tales, promising her she would always be safe. What had happened to that little girl? Where had she gone? Tears slid down my cheeks. I had given her everything, loved her with every piece of my heart, and now she wanted me buried in the ground so she could spend my money in Paris. Somewhere between those memories and the ache in my chest, my eyes grew heavy. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember was the shrill buzz of the phone on the table. I startled awake, my heart thudding. The clock on the wall read 3:15 a.m. Who would be calling at this hour? With trembling hands, I picked up the receiver. Hello. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a voice, low, taunting, unmistakable. "Richard. Thought you could hide behind your police friends, Margaret," he sneered. "Doesn't matter where they put you. I'll find you. And when I do, you won't hear me coming." The line went dead. I sat frozen, the dial tone humming in my ear. Richard knew where I was. And he was coming. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the table as the dial tone droned in my ear. My breath caught in my throat, the blood draining from my face. He knew. Richard knew where I was. The walls of the safe room suddenly felt thinner, as though they couldn't keep him out. I pressed both hands against the cold surface of the table, trying to steady myself, but my heart raced like a drum in a thunderstorm. The door opened quickly and Harris stepped inside, his eyes sharp. "Margaret? What happened?" I pointed to the phone, my voice a trembling whisper. It was him. Richard. He called. He said he'd find me, that I wouldn't hear him coming. Harris's jaw tightened. He picked up the phone, dialing quickly, listening for the trace. After a moment he hung up, muttering, "Blocked number. He's careful but not careful enough. Every call leaves a trail. We'll hunt him down." But his assurance didn't soothe me. Harris, he sounded so sure. Like he was already here. Harris crouched so we were eye to eye. That's what men like him do. They feed on fear. They want you weak. Don't give him that power. Not now. I swallowed hard, my body trembling. But what if he's right? What if he's closer than we think? He didn't answer right away, only placed a firm hand over mine. Then we make sure we're ready for him. The rest of the night passed in fragments. I tried to sleep, but every shadow seemed alive, every sound in the hallway a warning. By dawn my eyes burned, heavy with exhaustion. Harris knocked on the door, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. He handed one to me, his tone brisk. "We can't wait for Richard to make the next move. It's time we set the trap." I blinked at him. Trap? Yes. He's reckless, but he's not stupid. He knows you're under police protection. If he's still threatening you, it means he's confident he can get around it. So we'll make him believe he's winning. A chill ran through me. And how do we do that? "We'll leak a little information," Harris explained. "Something he can grab onto. He thinks you're in hiding? Good. We'll let him find out where you are, somewhere controlled, somewhere we're waiting. When he comes, we'll catch him red-handed." The idea made my stomach churn. "You're asking me to be bait again." "Yes," he admitted. "But you won't be alone. Not for a second. We'll have eyes everywhere. Margaret, this is the only way to stop him before he does something worse." I pressed the coffee cup to my lips, though my hands trembled so badly I could barely drink. I wanted to say no, to refuse, to run far away. But where could I run that Richard wouldn't follow? Finally, I nodded. "All right. Let's do it." That afternoon, Harris put the plan into motion. A mistaken update was slipped into the rumor mill that I'd been moved from the station to a small rental house on the edge of town. A house that, in truth, was wired with cameras, microphones, and officers hidden in unmarked cars nearby. Harris insisted I stay inside the station until the setup was ready. But by evening, we were on the move. The decoy house was small, with peeling paint and creaky floors. Inside, the blinds were drawn tight, the living room dimly lit. "This is it," Harris said, guiding me inside. "You'll act natural. Pretend like this is your temporary home. If Richard's watching, and I guarantee he is, he'll see what he wants to see. You vulnerable and alone." The officers settled in discreetly. One upstairs, two in the car out front. Harris stayed inside with me, his presence a steady anchor. I tried to sit on the couch, pretending to watch television, but my hands fidgeted non-stop. I kept glancing at the windows, convinced a face would appear at any moment. Hours passed. The air grew thick with waiting. Then, just past midnight, the phone rang. My body jolted upright. Harris grabbed it before I could move, answering sharply. "Harris." The voice on the other end was unmistakable, Richard's. Even from across the room, I could hear the smug tone. "Nice place you picked for her," Richard drawled. "Cozy. Out of the way. Easy to get in and out without being noticed." Harris's knuckles whitened around the receiver. "You're not as clever as you think, Richard. We're coming for you." Richard laughed, the sound sending chills down my spine. "You think you can stop me? You can't watch her forever. Sooner or later you'll slip. And when you do, she's mine." The line went dead. My stomach dropped. "He knows. Harris, he knows where we are." Harris set the phone down, his face hard. "Good. That's exactly what we wanted." But I couldn't share his confidence. Richard's voice still echoed in my head, thick with certainty. He wasn't bluffing. He was planning. The next night, the tension reached its peak. The house was silent except for the ticking of the clock. Harris sat in the armchair, eyes sharp, every muscle ready. I tried to knit to calm my hands, but my needles shook too badly. Then just after 2 in the morning, a noise. A faint scrape against the back door. My heart froze. Harris raised a finger to his lips, motioning for silence. He moved like a shadow, gun drawn, eyes locked on the kitchen. The scrape came again. Then the soft creak of hinges. The back door was opening. Harris signaled the upstairs officer. Within seconds, the quiet house was alive with movement. Boots on the stairs, radios whispering. But then came the sound that broke me. Richard's voice, low and taunting, floating through the darkness. "Mom, I told you I'd come." I couldn't hold back the sob that tore from my throat. My hands clamped over my mouth, but it was too late. He'd heard me. A laugh echoed back. "There you are." Before Harris could react, a figure lunged through the kitchen doorway. Richard, wild-eyed, bandaged shoulder, knife glinting in his hand. "Stay down," Harris shouted, moving fast, but Richard wasn't aiming for him. His eyes locked on me, and then he charged. Time slowed to a crawl. Richard's footsteps thundered toward me, the knife gleaming as he raised it high. My body froze, paralyzed by terror. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding louder than his roar. "Margaret, move," Harris shouted. Somehow my legs obeyed. I stumbled off the couch, crashing to the floor just as Richard's blade came down. The knife tore through the cushion where I'd been sitting, feathers exploding into the air. Before he could strike again, Harris launched himself forward. The two men collided, crashing into the coffee table, splintering it in half. The knife skittered across the floor, spinning to a stop inches from my trembling hands. "Grab it," Harris barked, struggling against Richard's weight. My hand hovered over the blade, fear chaining me in place. What if I touched it? What if he turned on me? Richard's fist connected with Harris's jaw, the sickening crack echoing through the room. Harris grunted, his grip slipping. Richard wrenched free, his eyes wild, and lunged for the knife. I didn't think. I just kicked. My slippered foot slammed into the handle, sending it skidding across the floor and out of reach. Richard's roar was animal-like, his fury boiling over. He spun toward me, his face twisted with rage. "You old witch! You ruined everything!" I scrambled backward, my palms burning against the wood floor. My back hit the wall. There was nowhere left to go. Then came the sound of boots pounding down the stairs. "Police!" Dropped to the ground. 2 officers stormed into the room, weapons drawn. Red dots from their tasers painted Richard's chest. For a split second he hesitated, his breath heaving, his eyes darting between me and the officers. Then, with a guttural scream, he charged. The crackle of electricity filled the air. Richard's body jolted violently, the taser wires biting into his skin. He convulsed, then crumpled to the floor, gasping for breath. Silence fell. Only my ragged sobs filled the room. Harris staggered to his feet, his jaw bruised, blood at the corner of his mouth. He holstered his weapon and crouched beside me. "It's over, Margaret. He's done." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "No, Harris. It's not over. Not with Emily still out there." Richard groaned as officers cuffed him, his eyes still locked on me, full of venom. "She'll finish what I started," he spat, his voice hoarse. "Emily won't stop. Not until you're gone." His words hit me harder than the crash of glass, harder than the sight of the knife inches from my chest. Because deep down, I knew he was right. Richard's snarling face haunted me long after they dragged him out of the decoy house in cuffs. Even with his body trembling from the taser, even with blood dripping from his bandaged shoulder, his eyes burned with one message. "Emily will finish this." I sat at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. Harris sat across from me, his face bruised but steady, his presence a lifeline in the storm. "You did good," he said quietly. "Better than most people would have done in your shoes." I nearly froze. I whispered, my throat raw. "If you hadn't been here, if those officers hadn't come when they did." "You kicked that knife out of his reach, Margaret," he interrupted firmly. "That saved your life. Don't discount your own courage." But his words didn't reach the pit of fear twisting inside me. Richard was behind bars, yes. But Emily was free. And if I knew my daughter, and God help me I did, she wouldn't rest until she got what she wanted. By morning, Richard's arrest was on the news. Local anchors reported it as a domestic incident turned violent, carefully avoiding the darker truth. They didn't mention the inheritance, the whispered threats, or the way my own daughter had cheered him on. But Emily knew the truth, and she wasn't hiding. Just after noon, Harris stormed into the safe room with his phone in hand, his jaw tight. "She posted on social media," he said. "She's making it look like you're the villain." My stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" He handed me the phone. There on the screen was Emily's face. Her eyes were red, her voice thick with fake tears. "My poor husband," she sobbed into the camera. "He tried to help Mom, but Detective Harris twisted everything. Now Richard's been arrested, and I don't even know if he'll survive prison. Mom, if you see this, please stop. I love you, but you're letting these people turn you against your family." The comments poured in beneath her video. Sympathy, outrage, strangers calling me heartless, greedy, even insane. "She's painting herself as the victim," I whispered, my hands shaking. "That's her angle," Harris said grimly. "She's buying time, manipulating public opinion, keeping herself clean while Richard takes the fall. But don't be fooled, Margaret. This is strategy. And it means she's planning her next move." The idea of Emily scheming in plain sight while the world pitted her made bow rise in my throat. But what terrified me more was the thought of what she'd do next. That night, Harris doubled the watch. 2 officers outside, one patrolling the hallway, and another car stationed down the block. He wasn't taking chances. Still, my sleep was restless, filled with nightmares. In one, Emily stood over me, her eyes empty, her hands clutching the inheritance papers. In another, Richard slipped through the bars of his cell like smoke, whispering promises of revenge. I woke drenched in sweat, clutching the thin blanket to my chest. The digital clock glowed 4 a.m. I reached for a glass of water on the nightstand, then froze. There, on the table beside it, was a folded piece of paper that hadn't been there before. My heart lurched. Hands trembling, I unfolded it. "You can't hide behind them forever." My scream tore through the silence, bringing Harris bursting into the room, gun drawn. He scanned the corners, then snatched the note from my hand. His face darkened. "She's been here." "How?" My voice shook violently. "The station was guarded, the house is guarded. How did she get in?" "She didn't," Harris said, his tone clipped. "Someone brought this in. Someone inside helped her." The words made my blood run cold. "You mean there's a traitor? One of your officers?" Harris's silence was answer enough. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Not for himself, but for me. We're moving again, he said sharply, crumpling the note. You're not safe here. I nodded numbly, my legs weak beneath me as I gathered what little I had. If Emily could slip messages past armed police, then nowhere was safe. Not the decoy house, not the station, nowhere. As we drove through the still dark streets toward yet another safe location, my mind whirled. How far would Emily go? She'd already broken into my home, already sent Richard after me with a knife. But this was different. This was proof she had reach, influence, allies. And that made her even more dangerous. We arrived at a motel on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place no one would think to look. Peeling paint, flickering neon sign. Only 2 cars in the lot. Harris paid in cash, checked us in under a false name, and escorted me to the room. Inside, it smelled faintly of mildew. But the locks were solid, the blinds heavy. Harris swept the space carefully before letting me settle. This is temporary, he said. We'll stay low, keep quiet, and wait for Emily to make her next move. She's overconfident now. That's when people slip. I nodded, though my chest tightened with dread. Harris, what if she doesn't slip? What if she wins? He crouched beside me, his voice steady. Then we'll make sure she doesn't. I promise you, Margaret, you will live to see this through. His words gave me a fragile thread of hope. I clung to it with everything I had. But that hope shattered just before dawn. The motel phone rang. Harris grabbed it immediately, his voice brisk. Front desk. A pause. His expression hardened. He covered the receiver, whispering to me. It's her. My stomach lurched. He put the phone on speaker. Emily's voice poured into the room, smooth and venomous. You can't run forever, Mom. Every time you move, I'll find you. Every time you hide, I'll be one step ahead. Do you really think he can protect you? He can't. No one can. My throat went dry. Emily, why are you doing this? I whispered, tears spilling down my cheeks. I loved you. I raised you. How can you want me dead? Her voice dropped to a chilling whisper. Because you've lived long enough. It's my turn now. The line went dead. Harris slammed the phone down, his fists tight. That's it. She wants a war? She'll get one. But even as he spoke, my body trembled with the terrible truth. Emily wasn't bluffing. She was hunting me. And she wasn't going to stop until one of us was gone. The silence after Emily's voice faded was unbearable. The hum of the motel lamp seemed louder, the ticking of the clock sharper, every sound pressing against my ears like a drum. I sat frozen on the edge of the bed, clutching the blanket to my chest as if it could shield me. My own daughter had just promised to hunt me down like prey, and the way she said it, calm, certain, final, made me believe her. Harris paced the small room, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. She knows too much, he muttered. Our moves, our safe houses, even this motel. She's not guessing. Someone's feeding her information. The thought chilled me to the bone. A mole, I whispered. Inside your own force. He stopped pacing and looked at me. His eyes were steady, but behind them I saw the weight of doubt. That's what it looks like. And until I flush that person out, every step we take puts you in danger. I thought back to Emily as a child, her little hands reaching for mine, her eyes shining when she showed me her drawings. That innocent girl was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as nothing but an obstacle to her greed. Maybe I should give her what she wants, I whispered, tears blurring my vision. The money, the inheritance, if it'll stop her. No, Harris's voice cut through the air like a blade. He crouched in front of me, his hands resting firmly on my shoulders. This isn't about money anymore, Margaret. It's about control. Even if you gave her every penny, she wouldn't stop. She wants you gone. I swallowed hard, my throat aching with grief. Then what chance do I have? He leaned closer, his eyes burning with determination. As long as I'm breathing, she won't touch you. But we can't just hide anymore. We need to turn the tables. Let her think she's winning. Then catch her in her own trap. A shiver ran through me. A trap. Exactly. Harris straightened, his mind already racing ahead. We'll set the stage. Something she can't resist. Somewhere we control every inch of the ground. The idea terrified me. But at the same time a spark lit inside me, small, fragile but real. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to end this nightmare. Harris checked his watch, then glanced at the door. For now, try to rest. I'll make the calls, start setting things in motion. Tomorrow we begin. I lay back on the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, my body trembling. Sleep didn't come, but resolve did. Emily thought she could scare me into silence, into surrender. But if Harris was right, if we could turn her own hunger against her, then maybe, just maybe, I could survive my daughter's wrath. Still, as the night stretched on, one truth gnawed at me. Setting a trap meant bait. And the bait would be me. The plan was dangerous, reckless. It would put me face to face with the very person who wanted me dead. But Harris insisted it was the only way. We set the trap in an abandoned farmhouse on the edge of town. The place was perfect. Isolated, dusty, and full of shadows. From the outside it looked like the kind of place someone could disappear in. But inside, Harris and his team had hidden cameras, microphones, and officers waiting in silence. And me, the bait. I sat in an old wooden chair at the center of the room, the boards beneath me creaking with every nervous shift. My heart hammered as I listened to the faint buzz of the surveillance equipment. "Remember," Harris whispered into the earpiece hidden in my collar. "You're not alone. The second she makes a move, we'll be there. Don't let her see fear. Make her believe she's winning." But I was afraid. Terrified. I wasn't an officer, I wasn't a fighter. I was just a 72-year-old grandmother who wanted to spend her last years in peace. Yet here I was, waiting for my own daughter to come and finish me. Time dragged. Every creak of the house, every rustle of wind against the boards, made my skin crawl. Then, finally, I heard it, the crunch of gravel outside. Emily. The door creaked open and there she was. My daughter. Her figure framed in the doorway, her face pale in the moonlight. She looked thinner, her eyes wild, her mouth twisted with something darker than anger. "Mom," she said, her voice soft, almost mocking. "You didn't think you could hide from me, did you?" I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. "Emily, please, it doesn't have to be this way." She laughed, a sound that made my blood freeze. "Of course it does. You've had your life, your time. Now it's mine. You think you can hand my inheritance over to strangers? To that detective? No, Mom. That money belongs to me. And tonight I'm going to make sure it happens." Her hand slipped into her coat, and my stomach dropped. She wasn't just here to threaten me. She had a gun. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Emily, you're my daughter. I love you. All of this. You don't need to do it. We can fix this. We can start over." "Start over?" she hissed, stepping closer. "After you humiliated me? After you had Richard locked away? You betrayed me, Mom. And you don't get to come back from that." She raised the gun. I froze, the world narrowing to the black barrel pointed at my chest. My ears rang with Harris's voice in the earpiece. "Hold on. Just a little longer. Trust me." Tears blurred my vision. "Emily, I changed your diapers. I stayed awake when you were sick. I gave you everything I had. Why is my love not enough for you?" For the first time, her hand trembled. For the briefest second, I saw the little girl she used to be flicker in her eyes. But just as quickly it was gone. "Because love doesn't buy Paris," she whispered coldly. And she pulled the trigger. Click. No bang. No bullet. Just the hollow, empty sound of a gun that had already been disarmed. Emily's eyes widened in shock. She pulled the trigger again. Click. Click. Nothing. Then came the thunder of boots. Harris and his officers stormed the room, weapons drawn. "Drop it, Emily. Now." She spun wild-eyed, as Harris lunged forward and wrenched the gun from her hands. She screamed, a sound of pure rage and despair, kicking and thrashing as two officers forced her to the ground and cuffed her. "And no," she shrieked. "You can't do this. She's old, she's nothing. That money is mine." I sat trembling in the chair, my face buried in my hands. My daughter, my only child, being dragged across the floor, spitting venom at me like a stranger. But then she said something that made my blood run colder than ever. "You think it's over, Mom?" she screamed. "It's not over. You'll never sleep again. I'll find a way out, and when I do, you're finished." Her words echoed in the farmhouse long after they pulled her out into the night. When the silence returned, I felt my body sag, every muscle trembling. Harris was beside me in an instant, kneeling down, his voice steady. "You did it, Margaret. She's finished." But I couldn't answer. My heart was breaking into pieces. Because no matter what Emily had become, she was still my daughter. I stared at the door where they had taken her away, my tears falling freely. What did I do wrong? I whispered. Where did I lose her? Harris put a hand gently on my shoulder. You didn't lose her, Margaret. She lost herself. Some people, they let greed eat them alive. This wasn't your fault. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to cling to that comfort. But the ache in my chest told me the wound would never truly heal. In the weeks that followed, Emily was charged with conspiracy, attempted murder, and countless other crimes. Richard remained in custody, his trial date set. For the first time in months, I was able to sleep without looking over my shoulder. But peace came with a cost. I had faced the betrayal of my own child. I had seen the monster greed could turn her into. And I had learned a lesson I wished I'd never had to learn. Sometimes family can be the greatest danger of all. Still, I also learned something else. That courage doesn't mean not being afraid. Courage means standing even when fear grips your bones. And that love, though it can be twisted, though it can be betrayed, is still worth holding on to. Because in the end, even as Emily's hatred burned me, my love for her never died. And maybe, just maybe, that was my strength. Now, before I close this story, let me say this. My name is Margaret. I'm 72 years old, speaking from the quiet hills of Vermont. And if you've listened all the way through this story, I want you to take one lesson with you. Never let greed blind you to the people who truly love you. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. Please remember to subscribe, like, and click the notification bell for more upcoming stories. And before you go, tell me, what part of the country are you watching from? I'd love to know. This is the end of my story,